And tonight, I wanted to start things off a little, I don't know if it's controversial to say it. I don't know if are there any shepherds in the room? No? Okay, then it shouldn't be too offensive. Sheep are dumb. They're just really dumb. They just are. When the Bible refers to you and I as sheep, oftentimes it's not to compliment how cute and cuddly and fluffy we are. And it's really oftentimes to show how desperately in need we are of a shepherd to lead us. It just is. It's a representation of how helpless we are without God, our good shepherd. And when you and I, when we're referred to as sheep, a lot of times in the Bible to talk about how we can go astray, right? Like how we can be led and we can go different ways. But the idea of being a sheep is also that, you very much are easily following a crowd. Sheep have this tendency that you might know is called a flocking mentality, or some people call it a mob mindset, where they huddle together and stay together because there's safety in numbers. It's kind of like we're huddled together tonight, right? Like the enemy can't get to us whenever we're all in close quarters like this. That's the idea for the sheep. So there's safety in numbers, but there's also the ability for one shepherd to have a massive flock because of this tendency as well, because they naturally desire to be together in these big herds. However, that same mentality, that same way of desiring to be in a crowd and move together can also be a really big detriment to the sheep as well. It can lead to their own demise. There was this story that I did in some of the research that I found in some of my research, and I found it fascinating. I had to share it with you. So there were these two shepherds that had this massive flock of 1,500 sheep. And they wanted to go and grab breakfast one morning. This is out in Turkey. This is a legit, real story in the news. And so they decided, hey, we're going to go get some breakfast. They'd leave their sheep. They'll be all right, just for a little bit, right? And so they go out to go and get breakfast. And lo and behold, there was one sheep that was just like, I'm going to lead. And like decided to take the entire herd with it, leading it to the edge of a cliff. Now these shepherds, they left their breakfast as fast as they could and ran to try to get to the herd, but they could not get there in time. They actually witnessed the first sheep jumping along with all 1,500 sheep leaping off of this cliff. I mean, can you imagine? And as they're watching all of them, their livelihood, this money jumping literally off of a cliff, the results of this was that 450 of the sheep lost their life. Now you might be saying, okay, wait, you said 1,500 sheep jumped off a cliff, but only 450 died? Yes, let me read you the article. This is from the Oskam, I guess is how you pronounce it in Turkey, newspaper. All right? So this is legitimately what the author said in the newspaper. In the end, 450 dead animals lay on top of one another in a billowy white pile. Those who jumped later were saved as the pile got higher and higher and the fall was more cushioned. Isn't that crazy? Like, that just blew my mind. I mean, sheep, they are dumb. Like, they just are. And I had to start off that way with a laugh because then I want to kind of cut deep a little bit, get a little serious, and say, hey, we are referred to oftentimes as sheep. And God is our good shepherd, right? But I wonder how often you and I might take our eyes off the good shepherd. Not get led by him, but start following the crowd, following the culture right over a cliff to our own demise. I could sit here tonight and compliment how cute and cuddly we are and, talk about those sorts of things, but I also cannot ignore the fact that you and I, like sheep, really do need a strong leader, a strong shepherd to get us to where it is that we need to go. And so today we're going to pick up in our series 23, Reset for Our Souls. It's this whole deep dive into Psalm 23, the pearl of the Old Testament. It's the John 3:16 of the Old Testament. Like, so many people know about it. It's been quoted so often. It's in all kinds of just regular everyday life things like movies and songs. I know that you've heard it before, but I want us to kind of read it again every single week, just so that we begin to memorize it and begin to know it and let it just ingrain itself within our hearts and within our lives. So on the screens, you're going to see this psalm come up. And I encourage you, read it along with me. We can read it out loud together if we want. We're going to do this every week. These are the only 6 verses of Psalm 23. This is the shepherd's psalm. You can read it with me if you'd like. It goes like this. The Lord is my shepherd. I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the darkest valley, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Now, you might have memorized that psalm in a different translation. I know I grew up hearing King James all the time, and it's like, you leadeth me, and all of that. So, like, if that's you, hey, you say it loud and proud. You don't got to change it up for us. But last week, as we jumped into this series, we zoomed in on the first verse. The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. And we really dove into that first one and tried to answer the question, do I know the shepherd? I asked you all, do you know the shepherd personally? It's one thing to know the psalm. It's one thing to know religion. It's one thing to go through motions and just show up because you're supposed to. But do you know him personally? Do you know the shepherd? Have you submitted your life to Jesus' leadership and lordship in your life? And so today we're going to follow that up by looking at the next 2 verses. We're going to look at verses 2 and 3 together, and we're going to seek to answer the question, where does Jesus want to lead me? Where does Jesus want to lead me? And the point that kind of overarches this entire message is what you'll see on the screen here, is that the leadership of Jesus is only as good as my willingness to follow. The leadership of Jesus is only as good as my willingness to follow. So like we're trying to answer the question, hey, where does Jesus want to lead me? It's good if we figure out where, but we have to be obedient and willing to follow him wherever that is. And so that's kind of the overarching point. The leadership of Jesus is only as good as my willingness to follow. And the big question for us is, where does Jesus want to lead me? And tonight we're going to see that Jesus wants to lead you to rest, to restoration, and to righteousness. And so we'll start with that first big point. He wants to lead me to rest. He wants to lead me to rest. The psalm in verse 2, it says that he makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. ... In some translations, in the NLT, it says that he lets me rest in green meadows, is the way that it reads. And I love that language. I don't know if you do. Like, I love that the God of the universe, that our good shepherd, Jesus Christ, desires and wants to lead you and me to rest. Like, I love that. The Hebrew phrase here, lie down, literally translates to lie down and spread oneself out. Like it's to just put up no defenses, to just relax and just be content with God. Like, that's what this means. Like, he makes me lie down. He lets me rest in green pastures. And what's even more wild, as we read that, like, that's like, cool, Jesus, I get to lay in a field and I guess I won't have allergies and like I can enjoy it or something like that. We read it that way, but it's like, this is countercultural. Like, this is mind-blowing to the reader in David's time as he's writing this. See, ancient religions during this time all had their concept of a creator God, a little g God that created all that there was and demanded work, had expectations, had this desire for activity and progress from its human subjects. And that was the way that every religion at this time worked. But the Hebrew religion here, the followers of the one true God, Yahweh, Yehovah, that's not what he expected. That's not what we see here. The creator God of the universe wants to lead us to rest. Every other creation narrative at this time, during David's time, every other creation narrative, as soon as humans came onto the scene, it was demanded of them to work, to earn the love and support and adoration of the gods. Like, this is what was common in this time. But again, not our God. Our God started off with rest. If you recall Genesis 1 and 2, the beginnings of the Bible, as you open up the first pages, the first 2 chapters, what you see is the creation of the whole cosmos. Everything that there is, that we see even today, that we experienced with the eclipse yesterday. Like that radical craziness. Like that, the creator God that created everything and made beauty like that before our eyes. This guy created everything in 6 days. And then on the 7th day, he rested. On the 6th day of creation, he creates humanity. The peak of creation, it says. He says it was very good when he created them. And as he creates them, he gives them rest on the next day. He establishes rest into the rhythm of life. 6 days of work, 1 day of rest. Don't miss this powerful point in the creation story. That God created Adam and Eve on the 6th day. On the 6th day, like it had already started. And so their very first full day of life, what God expects of them is what? Rest. It's as if God is looking at them and saying, you don't have to do a thing. Just be with me. Like that is what God is saying to them. And that is counter to every religion at this time. And David is saying that's what God desires. That's what the good shepherd desires for his sheep. Is that they just rest with him. It was a gift given at the very beginning of creation, and God desires to lead you and me to rest still today. He wants to lead us to quiet waters, it says. It refreshes our soul. Did you hear that? Quiet waters. That's slow. That is calm. That is restful. That's not frenetic and fast-paced and rapidly moving waters. Like, that's not what it says there. It's quiet. Some translations say still. He wants to give us rest. Let me ask you the question. Would the words restful and peaceful be good descriptors of your life? Would rest and peace be good descriptors of your life right now? Of my life right now? At times, I don't think that's the case. If we're honest, I think that we've not really followed our good shepherd to places of rest, but we're following our culture to rapidly moving waters that sweep us away and leave us exhausted as we're just trying to tread water and keep our heads above the water. Some statistics that terrified me as I was reading and studying this. I wanted to share them. They were alarming. Pew Research did a study, and they found that 60% of U.S. adults and 74% of parents said that they sometimes felt too busy to enjoy life. That is insane odds. 60% and 74, almost 75% of parents say that they feel too rushed and too hurried to enjoy life. They also did another study on the children and found that 1/3, 33% of children said that they feel too rushed to enjoy life. The age range of children were from birth to junior high. They felt too rushed to enjoy life. We're sitting right now in the student ministry space where those middle school and junior high into high school hang out. And just on the other side of those walls are where all of the kids fluctuate. They come in each week in and week out, and they hear about Jesus and they have a great time. But 33% of them, 1/3 of them, feel too rushed to enjoy life, this research says. Messiah University did a 5-year study of 20,000 Christians in the U.S., and they identified from this study that busyness is the #1 distraction from life with God. It's not that you and I don't know how to spend time with God. It's not that we don't know how to have a quiet time or that we don't desire it to know God more. It's just we're too busy. It's the #1 deterrent from life with God. Dallas Willard, who many of you probably know, the guy that has made him really even more famous than he already was, which is John Mark Comer. His book, Ruthless Elimination of Hurry, is actually a takeoff of this quote that I'm about to share with you from Dallas Willard. He is quoted as saying, "Hurry is the greatest enemy of spiritual life in our day. You must ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life." Because I think as I've studied this, as I read this, that God desires to bring us to rest. We can't rest because we're too busy. We are too hurried. We're too tired. We're too exhausted. And that's why I thought this was beautiful. We just came in and we sat down. And we were just with God. And we just got to sing to God. Literally, little to no setup at all for this. And we can just experience God in a different way. And just sort of rest together. That God desires for us. Philip Keller, you might have heard me mention last week about this little book here, The Shepherd's Look at Psalm 23. He actually says that sheep, bringing it back to the sheep, he says that sheep have 4 different things that they will not rest if these things are not addressed. He says that sheep will not lay down unless they are free from fear, free from conflict, free from parasites and flies, and free from hunger. Those 4 things. Let me explain those a little more. Free from fear. It made me think of my daughters. I have 2 girls, the sweetest girls in the world, and I can't tell you the number of nights in a row that I get woken up to, Daddy! Daddy! And them just, yelling out for Daddy or Mama! And yelling out for Lakin and I to come down and to just console them. Because what happens when fear is there? Rest escapes us. When we're fearful, rest escapes us. Let me ask you, what things are causing you fear right now? Like, if you just had to be real. Like, are you scared? I've heard many of the conversations recently. Are you scared of your grades right now? If you're going to pass that class, if you're going to be able to graduate, like, are you fearful of, am I going to land this job after graduation? Will it all come to pass the way that I want? Are you fearful of what you might go home to with the way your parents and family react to things? If they heard that you were here tonight, how would they respond? I've heard from some of you that there's fear there. What things are causing you fear? Because where there's fear, rest escapes us. And so we need to be relieved of those things. Conflict is another one that he addresses. What conversations do you need to have with maybe even someone here in this room? Someone that you've got some beef with, that you just have something going on and that relationship isn't where it needs to be. Like, what conversations do you need to have to reconcile those things? Because Keller says that if sheep have any frustration with any of the other sheep in the herd, they will not rest. It's a restless situation, and I'm sure that you feel that right now if you have any restlessness in your life because of confrontations that need to be had. Hear me. At the center of conflict is the gospel. The gospel is conflict resolution 101. That's what it does. Is it brings us back to unity, to wholeness, to restoration and rest. So it's gospel living to have healthy conflict. What conversations do you need to have that you're scared to have? Parasites and flies, those are like the little bothers in life, the worries in life that just fly around your head constantly. Have you ever stayed up at night, like woken up? I did this not that long ago, woken up and literally just was like, man, I need to do this and that and this and that. And I could not sleep because my mind would not stop racing. It's just those little worries and those little things, those little bothers in life that just won't leave you alone, that you cannot rest. And he closes it up with hunger. And says that hunger is another thing that sheep, if they have hunger within their bellies, they will literally not rest. He actually goes into a description and says, I don't know if you are aware of this, but sheep literally will overconsume to the point where if you leave them untended, if the shepherd is not there to help guide us to green pastures where we can have, healthier food to eat, if we just allow the sheep to stay where they're at, they will literally gnaw and gnaw and gnaw until they eat all the way to the root where no grass will ever grow again, and they starve themselves. That's what they do. But here in this psalm, we hear that God, the good shepherd, desires to cause us to lie down in green pastures. Like that which should satisfy my soul and satisfy my hunger, God says you get your fill and you lay down. It's a picture of satisfaction in God that's only found in him. But we, like these sheep, man, we can go for all these other things and just keep gnawing and gnawing and gnawing until we starve ourselves and set ourselves up for failure, trying to find sustenance and being full off of all these things that will never fill you. So with all of that said, whether you're just hurried and just at this frenetic pace of life and you never stop, or maybe it's one of these four things here: fear, conflict, the worries and doubts of life, or the fact that you just are hungry and needing to find satisfaction in him alone. The question I want us to ask Jesus, and is maybe one that you need to ask today like I did: what do I allow in my life that is keeping me from the rest that you want to provide? What in my life is keeping me from the rest that you want to provide in my life, Jesus? What of these things, the busyness or the conflict or the fear, the bothers, the worries, the hunger, what's causing me to not find rest in you? I think that's a great question for us to ask Jesus as he's wanting to lead us. So the shepherd wants to lead us to rest, and secondly, he wants to lead me to restoration. He wants to lead me to restoration. The text continues and it says that he makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He refreshes my soul. That word refreshes there actually in Scripture is oftentimes, almost 100% of the time, translated restore. So he wants to restore your soul. When I'm tethered to the shepherd, when I'm in proximity to the shepherd, it's a going back to health. It's a restoration. It's a rebuilding of something that is broken. When you come in proximity to God and you're welcomed into the arms of Jesus, there is a rebuilding, a replenishing, a restoring that happens only with him. He is a restorative God. But here's the truth about sheep. Philip Keller actually clarifies. So I told you they have a desire for hunger. When they're hungry, they eat and all this. They also have this crazy desire for water, to the point where they can get so thirsty at times and just desire to have their thirst quenched by anything that they can find water within. And specifically, they will find it within the hoof prints that they make on the ground. Now imagine that as you have thousands of sheep here all going in one direction and they're trenching out this ground with their little hoof prints, that inevitably water will begin to pool in these little hoof prints. And what's within those hoof prints is not just, clear Fiji water. Like, this is like tainted urine and feces and parasites are all within these waters. But sheep are completely contented to say, no, this is where I'm going to find the refreshment that I need. And they will do it. Why? Why would they subject themselves to this, you might ask? It's because they're terrified of water. I just found this out. I just thought that was crazy. Sheep are terrified of water, especially moving water. And the reason for that is naturally, they're basically a loofah. They are just like a giant sponge with toothpicks for legs. As soon as they get wet, they soak it up and they sink like an anchor. That's just what they do. And so they're terrified of moving water. And so what a good shepherd does, I learned all of this from Keller and some other research. So what a good shepherd does is he will go to the moving water that he knows those sheep will not approach, and he will trench out this little bitty stream of sorts where the water can come in slowly and pool there. It's clean, it's healthy water to drink, and the sheep will come up to it and enjoy and quench their thirst. The some other translations, as I've said, it says still waters, and so this water will just be still here. It's not intimidating, and the sheep will approach it and drink it and not get sick. But let me just be honest for a minute. How often do I, like these sheep that are just content with going to these tainted waters, how often do you and I do the exact same thing? We think, oh, like this is going to refresh me. Like I just need to cope. Like that's all I got to do. I just need a fix. I just need some help to get through this situation. So I'm going to go to this website and I'm going to click buy now because, that it just helps. It's just nice to see a package come in the mail. Or like, you know what? Like I'm going to click this hashtag and I know the trail of hashtags I'm going to go through to get to what I really came here looking for. And that's going to just, really tickle my fancy. It's just going to be exactly what I need in this moment. Like I need this. I just need a drink. I just need a drink. Like that's going to change things for me. I just want to be at that party. If I can just get into that scene, into that friend group, if I could just have these clothes and get this much money in the account, like all things are going to be okay. And what we are doing is we're trying to say, what can I cling to that is going to give me satisfaction? What can I cling to that's going to give me refreshment and that I can feel restored? The honest question that I ask and that you ask is, what can I do that I don't need God? That I don't need a shepherd to lead me. And I have to just be truthful to you. There is nothing that will satisfy you. Those pools that you're going to, they lead to death and disease. Do not go to them. Go to the Good Shepherd who leads you to clean, still waters that will refresh your soul. That's why Jeremiah in the Old Testament, the prophet, he says this in Jeremiah 2:13. He says, "My people have committed two sins. They've forsaken me. They've forsaken me, the spring of living water. And they've dug their own cisterns, these broken cisterns that cannot hold water." What are you going to find restoration, satisfaction, purpose, and refreshment? What cisterns have you dug for yourselves? What holes have your hooves made that you've thought that's gonna hit the spot? Where have you been going? Because perhaps the reason that God hasn't restored or refreshed some broken places in your life might be because you just haven't let him in. You're guarding that puddle, that tainted puddle that is filled with disease and death, and you're saying, it's mine. I don't need a shepherd. And God is like, if you just let me in, there's refreshment right over here. Just follow me. I've got it for you. Do you trust me? Just trust me. God can't begin to restore what's broken in me if I'm unwilling to just lay down myself and let him in. If I don't allow him access to the darkest of places of my soul. And the truth is that Jesus has already seen those dark places. He's the omniscient, all-knowing God. He knows what's going on. He understands. And he's right there waiting for you, not with condemnation, but with compassion. Not with anger, but with affirmation. Not with a heavy heart, but a heart full of love. Like that's who our God is. And so another question that I think that we just have to ask Jesus is there any place in my life that you want to work on restoring? Is there any place in my life, God, that you want to work on restoring in me? But as I said at the beginning, the leadership of Jesus is only as good as my willingness to follow. It's great to begin to know and ask these questions, but if we're not obedient to follow, then what's it all for? He wants to lead you and I to rest, to restoration, and then thirdly and finally, he wants to lead me to righteousness. He wants to lead me to righteousness. It says he guides me along the right paths for his name's sake. That's verse 3. He guides me along the paths for his name's sake. And when it says right paths there, it's the Hebrew word that's translated 77 different times in the Bible as righteousness. That's where I get that point from, that he wants to lead us to righteousness. You might have heard it in other translations. He leads me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. That's what he does. And so he guides us to paths of righteousness. And the reason that he does this is for our own reputation. You see, it's from our rest in God and with God. And it's from our restoration through him that then he wants us to live rightly, to be led in righteousness, in right living. We can't ignore this part of Jesus' leading in our life. We love the parts where it's like he wants to give me rest. Like, I'm all for it. I love to kick my feet up, God. He wants to restore me and lead me to restoration. Man, that's great. That's great. But he also wants to lead us to righteousness, right living. And we're like, I don't know. I just like to do me, God. And that's where the part is where we start to go off on our own way. We want to be our own shepherd. We want to go our own direction. We love that part about rest and restoration, but that right living piece, that's hard. That's hard sell. But hear me. It's not just about being with God, resting and being restored. That's where it all begins and that's where it continues and flows from. But our doing for God, our living rightly for God, flows out of those things. Our doing for God flows out of being with God. And that's just what it does. He not only leads you and I so that we can live right, that we can have right living, but he even pays for the times when we go the wrong way too. And that's how good of a shepherd he is. That's the gospel, is that we do not have to pay for our own sins, that he actually pays for it for us. God looks at us and says, I got you. The debt is paid. Even when you've gone the wrong way, come back home, brother or sister, son or daughter. Please come back home. Enter the flock again. This is the gospel. It's the good news. You don't have to pay for your sins because God's paid for it for you through his son. And so the final question that I think we need to ask Jesus is, what paths in my life do you want me to walk? What paths in my life do you want me to walk? For some of you, as you heard that path to restoration, maybe your story is that, man, I've got some hurts, I've got some habits, I've got some hang-ups, I've got some things that I really need to work through. And my path to right living is to get into some counseling, to get into some therapy, to get into, some meetings where I can get the help that I need to be clean again. Maybe that's for you. I want you to know that Metro Community Church has resources for you. This is not a place where you have to have all of these things weighing on you and hear a good fluffy message and then walk away, never changed. We want to walk with you in that. So there's people here that want to walk with you and journey with you. But more than anything, God wants to walk with you as your good shepherd and lead you to the right living, giving you that example in himself, in Jesus. And I have to believe that for those in this room right now, as you're hearing this under the sound of my voice, that the path that maybe some of you need to walk, maybe one of you needs to walk, is the path to salvation. That you actually, your path has never been that you submitted to the leadership of Jesus. That we're hearing about the shepherd's leadership, but I've never been led by the shepherd. And maybe for you, that is your next step. It's not so much to seek these other things, but it's to seek him first and foremost. And maybe that's not your story. Maybe for you, you've been walking with him for a little bit, but you have gone off on your own way. And I'm not sure if we have the video on the screen. Do we? This video that I found that you've probably seen before represents, I think, some of our journey as well. It has mine. And so turn your eyes to the screen and see this video. I find that video funny every time I see it, because at times, that's been my walk with Jesus, man. It's I gave my life to him. He pulls me out of the trench that I put myself in, and I'm just thank you, God, woo, all happy, and then boom, right back in the trench. It's why did I do that to myself? And maybe that's where you're at. Because left to our own devices, on our own, we will find ourselves right back in the trench that God has just jerked us right out of and tried to redeem us and lift us from. We wind up in the wilderness of sorts. Looking back to last week with Barack, my buddy, that got lost for 5 years in the wilderness. We're weighed down by 78 pounds of sin. We blinded ourselves to it, and we're becoming the next lunch for the predator out there who seeks to devour us. But God wants to take you and me and bring us home, to wash us off, clean us up, to shape up our fleece and give us a nice fade and bring us back into the flock, to remove all of that weight of sin, the burden of the sin, and say, I want you to come under my care. He wants to give you true freedom. And that freedom is with him, that you might be able to rest, be restored, and live rightly as you follow the Good Shepherd. My prayer for you and I is that we would come under that care. And maybe for some of you, for the first time tonight, but will we all follow our Good Shepherd where it is that he wants to lead us to rest, to restoration and righteousness? Let me pray that we would.